Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. I'm Congresswoman Yvette D. Clarke, Chair of the Congressional Black Caucus for the 119th session of Congress and proud representative of New York's 9th Congressional District, located in Brooklyn, New York. I want to thank my colleagues of the Congressional Black Caucus for their leadership and presence here this afternoon. I'd like to thank all the members of the press who are also present. The CBC is gathered today to express a grave concern about the alarming and coordinated efforts to undermine Black and minority representation through Republican-led redistricting. As you know, the Republican Party, led by Donald Trump's congressional Republicans and the GOP leaders in state legislatures across this country, are systematically working to rig the upcoming election. Their strategy is clear: dilute the voting power of Black and brown communities to cling to power by any means necessary. What we're seeing in states like Texas, Missouri, and others is nothing short of a direct assault on our representation in Congress. If these racially gerrymandered maps are upheld in the courts, the Congressional Black Caucus could potentially lose critical seats, which would undermine decades of progress in securing fair representation for our communities. Here's the truth. Donald Trump and congressional Republicans are fully aware that their billionaire first agenda is deeply unpopular with the American people. With inflation rising, tariffs straining the economy, and the consequences of the big ugly bill becoming clear, Republicans are scrambling to cling to power. So let me be clear, we are not going back. President Trump and his Republican allies are determined to drag this country back to a time when Black voices were shut out of the democratic process, and we will not allow it. Our communities fought long and hard for the right to choose our representatives. This desperate attempt to rig elections and erode Black political power will be met with fierce resistance. We will also continue to address rampant efforts to disenfranchise our communities by other means. We've seen Republican efforts to restrict voter registration, eliminate vote by mail, erect barriers to the ballot box for Black and minority communities. The CBC and House Democrats remain committed to protecting the sacred right to vote and defending free and fair elections at every level, because the stakes are too high and the fight for our democracy is far from over. Our democracy depends on fair representation, representation that reflects the diversity and the will of the American people. The CBC will continue to stand on the front lines, advocating for policies and legislation that protect voting rights and ensure that every voice, especially those from historically marginalized communities, is heard loud and clear in Congress. We call on our allies across the country to join us in this fight. Together, we will challenge these unjust maps in the courts, push for stronger voting rights legislation, and hold accountable those who seek to undermine our democracy. The future of our country depends on it, and we will not back down. It is now my honor and privilege to ask Representative Al Green of Texas to come to the podium.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I thank all of my colleagues for their endeavors to help us to bring some sense of justice to a system that is being perpetrated that is completely, totally, and absolutely grounded in racism. Let me start with this. In 1965, when the Voting Rights Act was passed, there were 6 African-American members of Congress, 5 Latinos, and 4 Asians. Currently, depending on how you count and who's counting, we have more than 60 African Americans. We have more than 50 Latinos and more than 20 Asian Americans. I say depending on how you count and who's counting because some persons can be defined in multiple ways. But here's the truth. If this plan succeeds in Texas, Texas will be just the genesis. The revelations will be seen across the length and breadth of the country. We are about to experience something that we never thought we'd see in our lifetimes, especially after having experienced what happened at the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which is probably the reason a good many of us are in Congress. It was at the Edmund Pettus Bridge on Bloody Sunday that John Lewis and a host of other people of goodwill suffered grave, gross, and inhumane injustices. These are persons who started out on a peaceful march from Selma to Montgomery, and they were beaten all the way back to the church where they started. John Lewis told me he thought he was going to die on that bridge. Friends, Bloody Sunday is the reason we have the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We would not, but for Bloody Sunday, have it maybe later on. But Lyndon Johnson wouldn't have been able to sign it when he did. It was Bloody Sunday. Yes, it was signed in ink with a pen, but it was written in blood. The blood of the people on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. People who died just prior to the march, and some just after the march. Some people think that it's comical to say that it's racist, it seems. It is racist. We've reached a point in our country where we can't say racism because you become persona non grata. But you can say anti-Semitism. And we say that. I defend Jewish people. I believe that we ought to eliminate anti-Semitism. But we have come to a point where we want to manage racism and eliminate anti-Semitism. We cannot allow that to take place. Not on our watch. We've had other people who brought us here. We didn't get here by ourselves. We ought not assume that we can allow language to become a barrier when you know if you're going to win this lawsuit, you've got to say racism. If you don't say racism, we don't win. Because Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is all about protecting racial minorities. So we got to tell the truth. So here's the truth as I close and leave this microphone. Here is the truth. We got to have more fight in us. We got to be willing to take a stand and understand that John Lewis knew what he was marching into. He saw the men on the horses. He saw the clubs. But they marched on. They marched on. The march is not over. We have to march on. I thank you.
We will now hear from Representative Emanuel Cleaver of Missouri.
Just moments ago, the Missouri House passed a measure that is monumentally unpopular in the state of Missouri. We are polling data to show that Democrats are opposed to this, independents are opposed to this, and Republicans are opposed to this. Unfortunately and painfully, the state has fallen into a state where the will of the people of Missouri is being substituted for ideology in some instances. And where we sit now, where we stand now, is that our state passed the woman's right to choose. The state, Missouri's so-called bloody red Missouri, passed it. passed the minimum wage. Missouri legislature has worked overtime to repeal it. So we have an out of control legislature in Missouri. But I want to share this and yield to my colleague from Louisiana. We are at a moment where there are powers trying to place this nation into the 1950s. They're trying to reverse the direction of the country. In my district, there will be three members of Congress. We had a street in Kansas City, Missouri called Troost. It has historically been the Mason-Dixon line, separating the black community from the Caucasian community. And people of goodwill, brown and black people have worked over the years to begin to erase it. The school district moved its building there. A major bank moved on Troost. A large headquarters of Head Start moved on Troost. We're trying to erase those stigmas, and this legislation begins to reestablish it. And I don't know if people realize the damage and danger of what's going on. We had an opportunity, and we still do, even though this is a dark moment, to set the standard for the rest of the world. We are the best place in the world to try to create a multiracial, a multicultural society where everybody's respected. That's gone, at least for the moment. And when our children and their children look back upon this moment, they're going to wonder, what were they thinking? How could they have made so much progress only to have it reversed? I think that this is one of the ugliest moments. I grew up in the South. This is one of the ugliest moments I've seen and felt in my lifetime. And it seems that there are people who are just hell-bent on creating division, trying to divide every group, everybody from everybody. And if it continues, Lord help us.
We'll now hear from Representative Andre Carson of Indiana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the Congressional Black Caucus family. I am well aware that I stand on the shoulders of giants and heroes and sheroes. No one is self-made. I'm proud to represent the 7th Congressional District in Indiana, which has the largest number of black and brown people in the state, 54% and counting. Indianapolis's urban community grew by 33% in the last census. The white population, 47.7%, and that dropped in the last census by 10%. So here's some math. Despite Donald Trump receiving just 58.6% of the vote, the Hoosier vote, Republicans currently hold 80% of congressional seats. The numbers don't lie. We have a strong and beautifully diverse community. Our country is made up of many coalitions: black, white, Asian, Latino, liberal, conservative, young, old, gay, straight, theist and non-theist. That's what makes us who we are. And to be who we are, every single vote must count. You can't give Republicans and Donald Trump an advantage in Indiana without diluting the voice of black voters. The strategy is very clear. The racism is undeniable. Target majority minority districts and then whitewash them. It's unjust, it's unfair, and it's certainly unconstitutional. It will not hold up and should not hold up to judicial scrutiny. This isn't the first time Black Americans have had to fight for the vote. This isn't the first time Black people have had to march for our rights. It was just 60 years ago, as was previously mentioned, that the U.S. passed the Voting Rights Act. The sheroes and heroes of 60 years ago laid the groundwork for the sheroes and heroes here today. Freedom fighters march for change, and today it's our turn. We march in the pathway that they paved for us. And make no mistake, we're fighting now. And if extreme Republicans across the country vote to redistrict 5 years early, we will fight back in the courts. We will fight back for fairness. We will fight back for equality. We will fight to save our country. Thank you.
Is Rep. Vesey here? We will now hear from Rep. Mark Vesey of Texas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a really sad day, I think, when the great state of Texas and the leadership in the great state of Texas bows to a corrupt and crooked president that is really just trying to do everything he can to accumulate as much power as he possibly can, including changing the rules in the middle of the game so he does not lose a Republican House majority here at the U.S. Capitol. And by doing so, he is eroding the rights of minority voters all across the state of Texas, including in the district that I represent, the 33rd Congressional District. And it's sad when you think about the great leaders, that Republican and Democrat, that our state has had over the years. And you look at subservient Greg Abbott, subservient Dan Patrick, who's our lieutenant governor, and this Speaker of the House that wants to make Black and brown state legislators get permission slips to leave the House floor. My state representative, Nicole Collier, who's my neighbor, they wouldn't even let her go home and change into clean clothes unless she agreed to sign a permission slip and be escorted by the police. That is how bad and how racist it has gotten in the Texas state capitol in Austin. And in addition to that, these maps that they drew and that they passed out, they are a clear violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And I believe that they will not be upheld. But the reason why we're here today is that this is now bigger than Texas. This is not just a Lone Star State thing. This is a nationwide thing. And Donald Trump is trying to convince Republican state legislatures and governors all across this great land to do this mid-decade redistricting scheme, and in the process, also eroding the rights of Black and brown citizens in these various states. And let's call it what it is. You heard my colleague from Houston, Al Green, say that it's not cool to talk about racism anymore. But this is a racist plan that they are doing nationwide, plain and simple. It's nothing else. It is racist. It is going to disenfranchise and disempower Black and brown voters everywhere, because Republicans know that this big ugly bill is unpopular. They know this president and his cronyism is unpopular, and they know that they cannot win on the policies. They don't want to talk about grocery prices that are going up. They don't want to talk about rents are skyrocketing. They don't want to talk about while they want to take people's insurance away while helping billionaires. That's not what they want to talk about. And so they're trying to enact these redistricting plans. They're trying to rig these maps, plain and simple. And that's not what America is about. There's a reason why, if you go back to the beginning and the founding of our republic, nobody was doing mid-decade redistricting in the late 1700s. Nobody was doing it in the 1800s. Nobody was doing it in the early 1900s. Tom DeLay did it first, and now Trump is doing it. You're going to tell me that Tom DeLay and Trump know better than the people that wrote this document that we live by in this body? No, it's not even realistic. And so we are going to fight this. We are not going to back down. And I believe that the Voting Rights Act will be upheld and that these maps in Texas will be overturned. But again, Texas is just the beginning. This is a nationwide fight, and it's bigger than who holds the majority in the House of Representatives. This is about maintaining our democracy and our republic. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We will now hear from Representative Troy Carter of Louisiana.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for gathering us here today for this very important discussion. Thank you all for covering it. Let me be abundantly clear. The maps as they are currently situated in Louisiana are as they should be. 1/3 of Louisiana's population is African American. We have 6 members in our delegation, 1/3, 2 of 6. This map that we currently have that created our second African American congressional district was passed, deliberated in both houses of our state legislature, both of which are majority led by Republicans. It was passed and then signed by a Republican governor. It was defended by our Republican Attorney General. It is as it should be. Yet, now that President Trump recognizes that he doesn't have the votes to defend his big, ugly law, he doesn't have the votes to defend his big, ugly law, so the attempt to deal from the bottom of the deck, to change the rules midstream, to now go back and ask our colleagues in the legislature to do what they don't want to do, to undo what they did, to go back into session and to redraw lines, to eliminate the work that they did. I underscore this second seat was deliberated, voted on, passed, and defended by Republicans. Our colleagues, my former colleagues in the legislature, toiled over this and did an incredible job to do the right thing. And now they're being asked to undo it. Why? Not because something's wrong with it, but because the president said in his words, not mine, I need to control the House. I need 5 more votes out of Texas. I need another vote everywhere I can get it to make sure that I control the Congress. Why? To advance his policies, to advance Project 2025. Never mind what's right. Never mind that our census is done every 10 years and then we take into account the ebbs and flows of population shifts. This president wants to do it ahead of time. Why? Again, because he cannot defend the actions of this big, ugly law. America, we have to be smarter than that. Republican, Democrat, or otherwise, we have to be smarter than that and stand against anyone who attempts to tear down our democracy, to tear down our rule of law, to change the rules midstream. What are we telling America when we say, when you lose, it's okay to change the rules? When you lose, it's okay to defy the odds. It's okay to do what you know is wrong as long as it advances your cause. What does it say to our young students out there who are studying government, who are contemplating being a part of this process? What are we saying to the rest of the world when this most powerful nation deals from the bottom of the deck against its own people? This caucus, our caucus, and all of you we invite to stand for what's right, to stand against this injustice, do the right thing, and rest assured, we will not run, we will not hide, we will fight. And we will fight with every tool that we have, all the way to the ballot box, to make sure that our Constitution, peaceful transfers of power, and that the very tenets of who we are is maintained. We are a democracy, not a dictatorship. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear from Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I have to make sure I don't get in trouble back home in Texas. So let me be really clear. These maps, racist. The fact that they are trying to silence Black and minority voters in a majority minority state, racist. Pulling all of the economic engines out of certain districts, also racist. The bottom line is this is a Republican-led and racist attempt to make sure that we silence the voices of Black and brown people. Now, I want to give y'all some numbers because I don't think that y'all fully understand how bad this is. Texas, number one, has more African Americans than any other state in this country. Right now, under the proposed maps, they want to make it to where Texas only has 2 districts in which African Americans have an opportunity to choose their representation. What does that mean for Black voices in Texas? That means that it is approximately 1/5 the voting strength of their white Texan neighbors. That is what it's going to be. Not 3/5, but we are going to be reduced to 1/5. So my colleagues have laid out a number of things that they believe is going on as to why it is that this is happening. But I'm going to start with number one, Trump himself. He's racist. I've been saying that. I said that during the campaign. Anybody that would adopt the objectives of Project 2025 truly believes in a racist ideology. But also, he has been very clear about retribution. Retribution because Black people had the audacity to have some sense and didn't want to go back to a time where Black unemployment was at a historic high like it is right now. Retribution because Black people didn't want even less access to health care in a country that continues to have an abysmal maternal mortality rate as it relates to Black women. Retribution because Black people didn't want to endure a supercharged police state like we are seeing with the invasion of Black-run cities. Retribution because Black women somehow became the most educated demographic in this country. They are trying to drown our voices out, but we will not be silenced. They've tried to bury us before, not knowing that we were seeds. We will grow and we will be resilient, just as we have time and time before. The final note that I'll mark for you is I know what we can do when we just come together as a country. Because as it's been stated over and over, 60 years ago, we ended up with the Voting Rights Act. And you know who signed that into law? A good Texan, LBJ. Texas can do better. Texas historically has done better. And so while we are fighting this in the courts, please believe, just know that the fight that the people are going to put up in the state of Texas is going to be a big fight no matter what happens, and we will win.
Thank you. We will now hear from Representative Amelia Sykes of Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of you and all my esteemed colleagues for being here to talk about this very important district. My name is Amelia Sykes, and I represent Ohio's 13th Congressional District located in Northeast Ohio. And after decades of splitting my community into 4 or more separate congressional districts for the benefit of partisan gerrymandering, the current configuration of Ohio's 13th district keeps the state's 4th largest county whole, brings together the 5th and 8th largest cities in the state. It includes townships, cities, villages, rural, agricultural, and suburban areas that is the most evenly divided congressional district based on the 2024 congressional vote in the entire country, where just over 100 votes separated Vice President Harris and President Trump. I'll say that again. Ohio's 13th congressional district is the most evenly divided in the country by the 2024 presidential vote, and it is one of the most competitive in the country. It is exactly what you think of when you're looking for a competitive congressional district that could swing from one party to another. And it's the kind of district that voters in Ohio demanded after a 2018 anti-gerrymandering ballot initiative was supported by nearly 75% of the citizens of the state of Ohio, gaining a majority vote in all 88 counties of the state. The citizens of Ohio wanted to enshrine fair districts into our state's constitution. Ohioans who were fed up with partisan gerrymandering made their voices heard at the ballot box, and in an attempt to discourage gerrymandering in the process, the state constitution required, unlike my other colleagues, a mid-decade redraw if the maps were not passed in a bipartisan manner. So nonetheless, even though voters demanded reform and bipartisanship, Ohio Republicans refused and ignored the people of the great state of Ohio, and in 2021, congressional maps were passed by partisan lines, on partisan lines. Even more enraging, the Republican majority Ohio State Supreme Court ruled all of the state legislative maps unconstitutional, not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, not 5 times, not 6 times, 7 times. That's right, the Ohio Republican Supreme Court ruled the state's maps unconstitutional 7 times, yet Ohio Republicans ran out the clock and refused to redraw the maps. So today, Ohioans are currently living under unconstitutional maps. Now, like many of my colleagues you've heard from, we're preparing for a political process that is going to be ripe with political warfare and gamesmanship. But where Ohio's 13th district is a little bit different than my colleagues, this is a district with a 90% white electorate. So this fall, the Ohio General Assembly and the Redistricting Commission will have to redraw Ohio's already unconstitutional congressional maps because of undue partisan gerrymandering, seemingly kicking off this whole redistricting battle. We do say we are the heart of it all in Ohio, but we did not want to be a part of this.